Welcome to Lattes and Lattes, the podcast where we blend the world of law and business with a warm cup of information and common sense. I'm your host, Sydney Whelan, attorney, real estate investor, and business owner. Each week, we'll be your go-to source for legal insights, business advice, and so much more. Whether you're a seasoned professional, an ambitious entrepreneur, or simply someone seeking guidance, we'll have you covered. From navigating the legal landscape to empowering you with valuable business strategies, we'll explore the legal side of life and enjoy a virtual latte along the way. So, grab your favorite latte, get comfortable, and let's dive into Lattes and Lattes. Good morning, and welcome back to another episode of Lattes and Lattes, sponsored by the Whelan Law Firm of Moberly, Missouri, your go-to source for legal issues encountered by your family and your business. In our last episode, we talked about the U.S. Constitution and how it has stood the test of time for more than 200 years. Today, we'll talk about one of the three branches of our government, our courts. Specifically, in today's episode, we'll break down some of the most significant U.S. Supreme Court decisions from the past few years, focusing on rulings that have reshaped affirmative action, LGBTQ rights, abortion, presidential immunity, and much, much more. Let's dive in. First, affirmative action and education. In June 2023, the Supreme Court delivered a pivotal decision in Students for Fair Admissions versus Harvard and Students for Fair Admissions versus University of North Carolina, fundamentally altering the landscape of college admissions. The court ruled 6-3 that the use of race as a factor in admissions violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. This decision effectively dismantled affirmative action policies that had been in place for decades. The majority opinion argued that using race to promote diversity was no longer necessary, while dissenting justices warned of the impact this would have on racial equality in higher education. Next, free speech and LGBTQ rights. The court made another significant ruling in Creative LLC versus Elenis. In June of 2023, a case that tested the limits of free speech against anti-discrimination laws. In the 6-3 decision, the court sided with a Christian web designer who refused to create websites for same-sex weddings. Citing her First Amendment right to free speech, the court found that compelling her to create such websites would violate her freedom of expression. This ruling sparked controversy, as critics feared it could pave the way for businesses to deny services to LGBTQ individuals based on religious beliefs. Supporters, however, celebrated it as a victory for free speech and religious liberty. Next, let's talk about the end of federal abortion rights. Perhaps the most monumental recent decision came in June of 2022 with the case Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. In a 6-3 decision, the court overturned Roe versus Wade, ending nearly 50 years of federal protections for abortion rights. The court upheld Mississippi's 15-week abortion ban and ruled that the Constitution does not confer a right to abortion, returning the authority to regulate abortion to the individual states. The impact of this decision was immediate, with several states enacting strict abortion bans. This decision created a patchwork of abortion laws across the country, with access to procedure varying widely depending upon where you live. Next, presidential immunity. A new precedent? Maybe. In 2024, the Supreme Court addressed a critical issue regarding presidential immunity in the wake of legal challenges facing former President Donald Trump. The ruling clarified that a sitting or former president is immune from prosecution for official acts carried out during their term. However, this immunity does not cover unlawful conduct, even if committed while in office. This decision has already had real-world implications, particularly for Trump's legal battles involving alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. Although the court granted broad protections for official acts, it did leave open the possibility of criminal prosecution for actions outside the scope of lawful presidential duties. Next, let's talk about election laws. State courts versus legislatures. In Moore versus Harper, a decision handed down in 2023, the Supreme Court rejected the controversial independent state legislature theory. This 6-3 ruling held that state courts have the authority to review and interpret state laws governing federal elections, including redistricting cases. The ruling preserved a key check on state legislatures by ensuring that courts can step in if election-related laws violate state constitutions. The case came out of North Carolina, where the state Supreme Court had thrown out a partisan gerrymander. The decision was hailed by voting rights advocates as essential for maintaining fair elections and preventing legislative overreach. Next, religious accommodations in the workplace. In 2023, the decision Groff versus DeJoy strengthened protections for employees seeking religious accommodations. The court ruled that employers must show a significant burden, not just minor inconvenience, to deny a request for a religious accommodation. This ruling redefined the standard for religious accommodations under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, making it harder for employees to deny requests based on religious practices. This case involved a postal worker who sought to avoid working on Sundays due to his religious beliefs. Next, student loan forgiveness. In Biden versus Nebraska, a decision of 2023, the Supreme Court blocked President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan, which aimed to cancel up to $20,000 in student debt for millions of borrowers. This 6-3 decision held that the HEROES Act, which the Biden administration used as its legal basis, did not grant the executive branch the authority to cancel such substantial amounts of debt without explicit congressional approval. This ruling ended one of the Biden administration's key pandemic relief initiatives, leaving the question of student loan forgiveness to Congress for future consideration. Next, environmental protections, limiting the EPA. In Stack versus EPA, a 2023 decision, the court scaled back federal authority over environmental regulation. In a 5-4 decision, the court ruled that the Clean Water Act only applies to wetlands with a clear surface connection to major bodies of water. This decision drastically reduced the EPA's regulatory reach, particularly concerning smaller isolated wetlands, and signaled a shift toward limiting federal oversight of environmental protections. As these recent rulings show, the Supreme Court is reshaping major areas of law, from race to education to LGBTQ rights, reproductive freedoms, election law, and presidential powers. The impact of these decisions will reverberate for years to come, influencing not only legal precedents, but also the daily lives of millions of Americans. All right, that's all for today's episode. Thanks for tuning in to Lattes and Lattes. Be sure to subscribe for more episodes as we continue to break down the most important legal issues affecting your family and your business. I encourage all of you to stay informed and stay engaged. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and follow us everywhere you listen to podcasts. And be sure to check out our new Lattes and Lattes podcast pages on Facebook and Instagram. Our goal is to create a space where we can learn from each other and grow together. So we want to hear from you. Share your thoughts and ask questions. We'll put all of the links in our show notes. And as always, my friends, grab your favorite latte, hold your loved ones tight, and have a great week.
This podcast episode contains general information for discussion purposes only. Each case is different and must be judged on its own merits. Missouri rules generally prohibit lawyers from advertising that they specialize in particular areas of the law. This show should not be construed to suggest such specialization. Nothing on this show should be taken as legal advice for any individual case or situation. This information is not intended to create an attorney-client relationship, and the listening or viewing of this podcast does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.